Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Vanishing Hour. All right, so tonight, whatever time it is, we are going to be discussing a missing persons case about a beautiful, brilliant, and motivated 18-year-old woman who suddenly vanished one Monday night after clocking out of her part-time job way back in 1994. This young woman and her family, in my opinion, have been severely let down. The ball was fucking dropped so many times in this case, and answers are still needed for this family. Her mother, who by the way is stunning, I don't know how old she is, but she has not aged since 94, I swear on my life. But her mother has done everything she can to keep her daughter's case in the spotlight, and she's continuously pursued answers. I just felt like this woman was super genuine. From the first interview that I saw, she just felt so honest and motherly, and you can just feel the sadness. I hate to admit this, but I'm going to anyway. You ever watch like news clips of parents of missing children and you just feel like it's awkward? Not like they're responsible or did anything per se, but their emotions just seem weird. It's not in every case, and it's very rare for me, honestly, but sometimes I'll be listening and watching, and I'll get, like, that weird vibe, and then I feel guilty. But then I still have the weird vibe, so then I'm fucked up. Anyway, my point is, I didn't get that from her mom whatsoever. Quite the opposite, actually. This is a good mom, and she just wants her baby home, and I, of course, connected with that. Anyway, some of you may have heard of this case, some may haven't, but right now we are delving into the vanishing of Cleashindra Hall, so join me and let's see what we can come up with. Cleashindra Denise Hall, known as Clea to her family and friends, was born March 30th, 1976. She was born to parents Willie and Laurel Hall, and it appeared from my snoopy ass looking at like background photos of some of the interviews that she was maybe the only daughter, and she had 3 brothers, I believe. Obviously, this was just an observation. Clea was a very self-driven, responsible, and smart daughter and young woman. She attended Watson Chapel. She attended Watson Chapel High School in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is about 40 miles southeast of the capital, Little Rock, which I totally had to look up. Didn't know it. She was on the honor roll there, and during her senior year, she was on trajectory for graduating at the top of her class, and she was chosen to give the commencement speech for her graduating class. She had big plans of becoming a medical doctor, specializing in the field of pediatrics and helping children. So much so that she had applied and been accepted to the pre-med program at Tennessee State on scholarship. She secured herself a summer internship at a Boston pediatrics office and was also planning to attend a leadership conference while out there that upcoming summer. Which honestly, like, I read all of this and I was kind of shocked at how put together she had her future, and at only 18. Even at like 29 now, I literally have no fucking clue what the fuck I'm doing with my life. And when I was 18, I knew even less. I think I was making pizzas at Domino's and like taking a math class at the community college, where I eventually dropped out of because being a teen parent sounded like far more desirable life choice. No regrets, obviously, but I would have killed to be this centered and smart at her age. Anyways, so on top of literally having the perfect career path mapped out for herself, Clea also took on a part-time job working for a Dr. Larry Amos at his home office, just a hop, skip, and a jump from her home a few blocks away. Larry was not a medical doctor. He was the other kind of doctor, and he ran a nonprofit organization from his home that has been vaguely described as support for, quote, in-home daycares. Clea's mom stated in an interview that he had a federal grant for a food program of sorts that I think supported in-home daycares. And Clea did clerical work for him after school and on weekends just to help save up more money for summer and college and expenses and stuff like that. Clea also was a very social and outgoing person as well. Her freshman year, she attended prom and was stunning in this beautiful blue ruffle dress. She participated in the Watson Chapel High Marching Band, where she could be seen playing the cymbals and percussion, And she volunteered in the nursery at church on Sundays, which was totally my thing as well when I was growing up. She was just a good kid, and honestly, she's what I hope my children will be like when they reach her age. Children like Clea don't go missing of their own volition. They just don't. Which makes the events that are about to occur all the harder to understand. So Saturday, May 7th, 1994 was an exciting weekend for Clea. She was attending her senior prom this time. Kind of, this sort of toast of farewell to high school. She splurged on a beautiful dress. She got her hair and nails done and celebrated the night away with classmates as they all cherished the last remaining weeks of high school. Graduation was just around the corner, and soon Clea was going to be starting the oh-so-carefully planned journey to her dreams. Sunday, May 8th was Mother's Day, so Clea spent the day with family celebrating her mother and appreciating everything that she had done for her. So when Monday, May 9th rolled around, it was time to get back to the normal routine of school and work. Laurel, Clea's mom, recalls that day in an interview, starting off like any other day. Clea went to class that day. She got out of school around 2:30 and came home and decided to take a nap on the couch for a little while after stopping by Dr. Amos's residence/office and noting that no one was home. She figured, hey, I'll get some rest while I wait for someone, whether him or his wife or, a coworker, to arrive, and then I can go back and start work. Laurel says that Clea napped on their living room couch until about 4:45, at which time she woke Clea up and let her know that Dr. Amos's wife called and said she was home now and that Clea was free to come over to start her shift. Apparently, Hurricane Cohen's destroying our living room. Anyway, Clea rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, and Laurel hopped into their car and took Laurel less than a mile down the street to the Amos's residence. Clea didn't bother bringing her purse or wallet or anything personal belonging to her because she didn't need them. The Amos residence was a large Tudor-style home with 2 single-car garages and kind of like a wrap-around lawn. There was no gate or fence. All of the properties in the area seemed to kind of just like meld together. There was no like property line or anything, which actually is kind of cool. But that's where Clea was heading to work. Laurel dropped her off, waved her daughter goodbye, and reconfirmed that Clea would call her later when she was ready to get picked up, a routine they followed religiously despite Clea working within walking distance of home. Which, in my opinion, is good momming. I'm the same way. This was back in 94, where cell phones were just barely becoming a thing, and honestly, pretty much nobody had them except, like, business people. And honestly, even with a cell phone, I'd rather just pick up my kids, rather than make them walk or hope they catch a ride or call an Uber, but that's just me, though. Laurel recalls watching her daughter walk up to the door, open it, and go in before disappearing behind it, never once considering that this would be the last time she would see her daughter. At about 8 p.m. that night, Laurel is at home with her son when the phone rings. Both her and her son pick up the phone. Remember, kids, this was when landlines were a thing and many people had more than one phone in the house. The call is from Clea. She is at work still and asks if anyone has called the house for her. When her family relays that there has been no calls for her, she states that she's going to remain at work for a little longer to finish some things up, but that she will call when she's done and ready to get picked up. Laurel hangs up the phone and continues to wait by the phone until she receives that call. Which, I guess this is flag number 1 for me that stood out. Again, a time when cell phones were not a thing, so calling home asking for any messages was normal. It wasn't out of the ordinary. It's completely 100% common. But what this told me was that Clea was expecting a call. From whom? We do not know. I wonder if her mother knew or even asked. My assumption would be a boy or a love interest of some sort. Let's be real, ladies. We only ever go out of our way like that when we are expecting to hear from a certain schmansome gentleman caller or woman caller because, inclusiveness. Clea was not known to have a boyfriend at that time, so it's never been mentioned who she may have been waiting on a call from. but I kept that in mind as I continued to research this case. Some time passes, though, and Laurel dozes off. At about 12:45 a.m., Laurel is woken up by her husband Willie returning home from work. Willie usually comes home and quickly glances in on the kids just to make sure everyone is home and sleeping before he heads to bed himself. This night, however, he glances in on Clea and notices she's not home. He wakes Laurel up asking where Clea is and if she's still at work. Laurel realizes she's dozed off and was never woken up by the ringing phone like so many times before. She decides to call Dr. Amos's office/house to see where Clea is. She notes that she didn't have his number on hand, so she had to refer to the phone book to find it. She calls, and the phone is picked up on the first ring. First ring, guys, at nearly 1 a.m. It's Dr. Amos himself. Flag number 2, folks. Laurel asks if Clea is still there, and he says, nope, she left already. Laurel's like, okay, when? To which Amos says, I think she left sometime around 8:30. I'm not sure, let me check her time card. Handwritten time card, by the way. Sure enough, it says 8:30. This here is fat flag number 3 for me. So he tells Laurel, based off of the time card, Clea left around 8:30. She usually would say goodbye to him when she left, but she didn't that evening. Instead, he says he heard the door open and the garage door close shortly after, something extremely common. Laurel said that when she would usually come to pick up Clea, she didn't want to honk her horn, so instead Clea would poke her head out the window, see her mom, say bye to the Amoses, and head out the garage door, pressing the closed door button after she left, and ducking under the door as she exited. Something we've all done at least one time or another. Now, the problem I have with this is that Larry here later tells police that he saw Clea leave with an unidentified person in an unidentified vehicle. So, which is it, pal? Either you saw her leave, or you didn't. And if you did, you're telling me you couldn't even get so much as a vaguest of descriptions of the vehicle or the driver? Was it a truck? Was it a van? Was it light-colored? Was it dark-colored? Laurel also has an issue with this because apparently Larry was known as the guy who knew what was going on in and around his property at all times. She doesn't elaborate in the interview on examples, saying she doesn't have enough time to at the moment, but that rest assured, it's essentially horseshit that he doesn't know any of that information. But back to our timeline here. Larry Amos tells Laurel, hey, she's not here, she left hours ago. So obviously Laurel's a little upset. She thanks the Amoses, or I should say Larry, and hangs up. Now, despite it being completely out of character, Laurel considers that maybe Clea was out with friends, trying to flex a little independence so close to graduation. And, while annoying, she tried to chalk it up to that and sat by the door waiting for her daughter to come home that evening. Me? I am always like 0 to 100 instantly. I would immediately be thinking someone has stolen my child, and I throw myself into a full-blown panic attack. Literally just this morning, Shadow went to drop off our kindergartner at school. I glanced at the clock, or not this morning, it was yesterday morning. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I glanced at the clock about 8:20ish, which is like 10 minutes past when he usually gets home from doing that, and I'm trying to calm myself, my inner psycho that was immediately considering every possible horrible outcome that could have happened. He literally walked in the house like 5 minutes later. I confessed my sins, and he's like, yeah, I stopped for gas. Ironically, I should have known this. My lazy ass drove his car the day before and noted it needed gas and didn't put any in because I'm a trash wife. This is my mind 24/7. I'm well aware of how unhealthy it is, but it's just a small cog in a vast machine of chaos that is my brain. Anyway, by the time morning comes, Laurel hoped that wherever Clea had been that night, she was now making her way to school. School was something Clea wasn't willing to jeopardize, so Laurel had her son, who also attended the same high school, call her when he found his sister. When he got there, though, and realized his sister hadn't arrived at school either, he phoned his mom immediately from the office. Laurel knew that something was definitely not right at this point, and she immediately called the police. Now, this is where I really start to get pissed off. Laurel calls the police, and they tell her that because her daughter is of age, she has to wait at least 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. I get that she may be 18 legally, but she was still in high school. She was still a child being looked after by her parents. What the fuck kind of horseshit excuse is that to not look for someone? Well, Willie and Laurel weren't just going to sit around and wait the remaining hours and do nothing. They began calling every single living being that could have possibly had any sort of inkling as to where Clea was. They call family, they call friends, friends of family, family of friends. Nobody's seen or heard from Clea. She was just gone. When 5 p.m. finally rolled around, which was 24 hours from the last time that Laurel had seen her daughter, they drove directly to the Pine Bluff Police Department and filed that report. Again, the stupidity here. The police didn't really take Clea's disappearance serious initially. They pulled their generic, she's probably with friends and will come home soon, garbage. This garbage that they fling around so often. She's an honor roll student. She has a scholarship. She's lined up into the pre-med program at the university. She has an internship set up. She works part-time, has never been a problem child or ran away in the past, and you're telling me she'll probably turn up after partying with friends? Literally, get the fuck out of here. Get out of here. Give me your fucking hat and your badge. I'll look for her myself. I'll do your job. Ugh. Anyway, Laurel knew her daughter. She knew that whatever was keeping her daughter from coming home, it wasn't by choice. Her daughter may have been 18. Sorry, there is a siren in the background. All right, I think it's gone. Anyway, her daughter may have been 18, but she was no adult, at least not yet. She hadn't even graduated high school yet. She had no bank account, no car. She left that day with no purse, wallet, cash, ID. This wasn't normal. Even for an adult, I don't feel like this would be a normal standard behavior. It's definitely not for a well-behaved, responsible student. So Laurel and Willie continued their efforts for searching for Clea, despite feeling like they did not have the support from the police. They made their own flyers and began distributing them all across town, hoping for leads to start coming in. Now, the Amos property where Clea was last seen sits on a single-lane road across from a very vast, wooded, rural area. I don't like it. Looks creepy as fuck, and apparently Clea's parents didn't like it either. They decided to start searching through the wooded area to see if they could come up with anything that could point them in the direction of where Clea was. God forbid they find Clea. Thankfully, they did not find her, but they also didn't find anything of use either. Several days passed, and police finally decided to start taking this case a little more seriously after Clea still hadn't returned home. They started with interviewing those that knew Clea best. There was talk about a male student that also attended the same school that some allegedly thought might be a boyfriend of Clea's, even though Clea had never made mention of a boyfriend before. The unidentified student was immediately brought in for questioning and was put through a lie detector test that he willingly submitted to. The results did come back inconclusive, which doesn't mean shit if we're being honest, which is why lie detector tests are worth shit in a court of law. The student, though, was more than willing to cooperate with law enforcement. He submitted to countless searches, including a search of his own vehicle, that he offered. Police didn't find anything remotely related to Clea or her disappearance, and ultimately he was let go due to the lack of anything on him. During this time, though, police also spoke to Larry, as well as several other employees that worked with him and alongside Clea, which I would love to know who these people were and, like, an in-depth background on them. They stink to me. Them and this doctor. But no names were ever given. There wasn't much information mentioned about them other than that they existed, so I wasn't able to pursue that further. But anyway, police spoke to both. Interestingly enough, the day that Clea went missing, the same day pretty much that Laurel called looking for her daughter, Larry leaves town. He doesn't return until that weekend. Later, he states that it was a pre-planned trip and that, of course, people are going to try to paint it like him fleeing or getting rid of evidence, which, okay, sure, it was pre-planned. People can't knock you for that. But when a responsible high school student that you employ goes missing literally the day before, and you know she's missing, you don't cancel this trip to help look for her, especially since she was last seen entering your home. You're considered one of the last people to see her? What the fuck's wrong with you, sir? Of course people are going to shit on you for that. Hell, I'd shit on myself if I were you. Even if by some miracle you have nothing to do with this, what a horrible human being you are for not giving a shit. This, however, is when Larry tells the police that he saw Clea get into an unknown vehicle operated by an unknown person at roughly 8:30 p.m. the night she went missing. Again, not what you initially told Laurel. So which version is the correct version, if either of them actually are? Also, for someone who is allegedly super brown-nosy about his neck of the woods, I'm surprised you didn't get a license plate number or at least a very general description of what you saw, sir. However, when police speak to the employees that were there that night, they give a differing account of events. Equally unlikely, in my opinion. One coworker states that she clocked off at about 8:25 p.m. and offered Clea a ride home, but Clea declined, stating that she was going to walk home, something Clea would never do, and hadn't done since working there. There's speculation around this account, both of the coworker's fault and of maybe Clea's ulterior motive behind the statement. Some think that maybe the coworker misheard her or misunderstood what Clea said, while others speculate that Clea maybe in fact did say that, but didn't actually have any intention of walking home, and was maybe trying to conceal the identity of who would be picking her up. But I mean, why not just say, my mom's getting me, like she always does, instead of like a flat-out lie about walking home? That is harder to believe. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this statement. Without knowing who the employee is and digging into them a little bit, it's hard to know the level of validity I can place in that statement at all. Maybe they're lying to cover up what they were a part of or what they saw out of fear. I'd believe that far more than Clea telling that lie to hide who picked her up. Also, could one of them corroborate the other's account of what happened? I mean, they all worked together, I'm assuming. Wouldn't the employee be able to confirm that the doctor saw Clea leave, and or vice versa? The house is pretty big. I think it was over like 7,000 square feet, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe their versions differ because they weren't in the same part of the house together. But then, whose account is accurate? I suppose if they were telling the truth, it would make sense that both accounts happened, but I still cannot get behind the idea that the doctor saw her leave but literally didn't see anything else, and then told her mom he didn't see her leave, just heard her leave. When the story has that many versions to it, it's likely that neither of them are actually the full truth. Well, things only got worse from here. It took the investigators roughly 2 weeks to finally come to the conclusion that maybe Clea was actually met with foul play and that they needed to take this more seriously. It was right around then that they decided to search the doctor's residence/office for any clues. Surprise, surprise, they found nothing. But I guess if you gave the guy a 2-week head start, you wouldn't find anything, would you? Unless he's a complete ape. Even if he had nothing to do with her disappearance, though, his house would have been considered a crime scene regardless, and would have needed to be searched for clues anyway. You know, tire tracks, foot tracks, trash, discarded clothing, DNA, all things that would more than likely be gone by 2 weeks. Clea's parents were rightfully upset at that flagrant lack of urgency in locating their daughter. There's a plane flying overhead. Give me a second here. They made their disdain known, and police kind of countered it with the excuse that being that there were several people present in the office at the time of her disappearance, it was unlikely that there would have been any wrongdoing done to Clea there at the office. I'm sorry, but what in the literal fuck kind of logic is that? Is it so far out of the realm of possibility that maybe they were in on it? Or that maybe, I don't know, the handwritten timesheet that you're basing this whole timeline on, along with the number one person of interest's account could, I don't know, be false? Maybe the coworkers left before anything happened to Clea. I mean, what the fuck is going on here? Holy hell. The one thing that both Clea's parents and these half-assed police agreed on, though, was that Clea didn't go missing voluntarily. She didn't have any reason to. She had her entire life diligently mapped out in front of her, all of which she so deeply desired for herself. This girl had no record of running away, troublemaking, or mental health issues like depression that would maybe cause her to want to cut herself off from the rest of the world. She was literally the poster child for the opposite of that. Detectives started working the angle that she had to have been picked up by someone she knew. Clea wouldn't have gone off with someone she didn't know and trust. That just wasn't like her. This isn't the most far-fetched idea out there, I'll be honest. It's one of the two working theories I am willing to dip a big, giant toe into, but we will go into that in a minute. Despite numerous tips coming in, they were never able to actually get so much as a basic description of a vehicle or a description of a driver. Interestingly, though, you have the employer being the only person corroborating the theory that she was picked up by anybody other than her mother. So, horseshit. I'm sorry. Horseshit. Now, like me, Clea's parents weren't buying what the doctor was prescribing. From the jump, Laurel and Willie were of the mindset that he was the last to see their daughter, therefore he had to have some sort of piece of information at the very least, if he wasn't the culprit. Also, his wife. What the fuck? She was there that night as well. She's the one who called Laurel and told her, "Hey, I'm home. Clea can come by now and start work." Her husband's employee goes missing from her own goddamn house and she doesn't know shit. Come on now. The cherry on top of this suspicion Sunday for Clea's parents was the fact that Dr. Larry refused to take a polygraph. Now, I know they don't mean shit. But if you're innocent, take the damn test. The student did. And they aren't admissible in court, so why would you refuse, in my opinion? Worst case scenario, you fail, but they're just going to keep digging until they either find that you did do it, or they're not going to find anything and they'll eventually move on. Refusing is literally taking a giant Sharpie to your forehead and writing, "I did it." Again, this is solely my opinion. You're free to either agree or disagree, obviously. But without any physical evidence to actually support the suspicions, police didn't feel they had a strong enough case against the doctor. This is something I actually agree with, and I think oftentimes many victims, families, and even bystanders like us tend to forget or just not be aware of. It's not enough for someone to be suspicious. It's not enough for someone to be the last person to see someone before they disappeared. It's not enough for them to refuse a lie detector test or fumble their account of events. Sure, it's more than enough to point in their direction and cast one highly arched, suspicious eyebrow their way, to apply the magnifying glass 1,000,000 times harder. But that's all it's enough for. There needs to be several things before the swift hammer-dong of justice can rain down upon the suspected scum. There needs to be proof that a crime has been committed, which, in this case, they were 80-90% sure there was, being that this was just so far out of character for Clea, and literally no one was able to contact her. Doesn't mean she was dead or harmed, though, so in the eyes of the law, this was teetering in the realm of false imprisonment/kidnapping/abduction, yet still no proof of that. No body, no proof. The second thing they need is something physical to link suspect to victim and crime. This is crucial to remember, guys. Like I said, it's not enough to be the last person or to refuse a test or to refuse to help. It's not enough to be a shithead who leaves out of town on a pre-planned trip when your employee has just gone missing. It's just not enough. They need something physical, a witness account or blood or other DNA, incriminating facts like the timeline not matching up and repeatedly catching him in lies. They need surveillance footage, confessions. They need shit they can take to a jury of 12 people not close to this case whatsoever with confidence and say, "He did this, here's the proof, let there be no doubt in your mind that nothing other than that happened and that he is at fault." That is the standard that is required not only for arrests, but for trials as well. Prosecutors are the ones who have to take a look at a case and weigh the odds. Can I fucking win this with what I have? It isn't like they want to let these assholes walk. It's not even that they think they're innocent. It's about what can I convince people of beyond a reasonable doubt. Because they get one shot at this shit. You charge someone with a crime, you take them to trial, and they are found not guilty. Guess what? That's it. Doesn't matter what evidence comes out after the fact. Take a look at O.J. Simpson murder trial. Dude literally released a book after the fact, basically admitting how he did it, and he's never been criminally held responsible for the murder of those two people. Granted, he's fallen from grace even further since then, if you can imagine, and I think he's in prison now for some other attempted murder or robbery in Vegas. I don't know. Double jeopardy, guys. You cannot be charged with the same crime twice. Keep it in mind when you have tough situations like these. While I think the police literally shat the bed in every other aspect of this case thus far, they were correct in the fact that this case just never had enough evidence, despite suspicions, to arrest anyone. And it sounds like it's remained that way since. Detectives made claims to the media that they had several persons of interest in the case, and are just hoping that the missing piece will come in and tie everything together. The police chief, who's been in charge of this case on and off for like 20-something years, even hinted at one point that they knew more than likely what happened to Clea, but they had no way of physically proving it, hence it going cold. He said that he had collected call records from the home office that evening and analyzed those. There wasn't any mention that any calls were placed that could lead to any info, and he basically never elaborated further. And that's kind of what's so frustrating about this case. I don't believe this case was destined to be a cold case. I think everything that was needed to solve it was there initially. Negligence on the investigators' end to take this seriously from the jump cost them this case. 18 years passed, and in 2012, there was renewed hope in the case when several tips came in regarding the case that literally shot this case to the front page headlines. It brought new heat on Dr. Larry, and things looked like they were finally starting to shift. 2 tips came in from previous hired contractors of Larry Amos. One was like an electrician or a drywaller or something of that nature. He had been hired to do some work on the Amos office/residence a couple years after Clea's disappearance, sometime in the late 90s, and he distinctly remembered seeing what appeared to be blood spatter on insulation within the home. Another construction worker who was hired to fill holes in the yard or something like that stated that around the same time he noted being on the property and repeatedly being slapped in the face with the foulest of odors that smelled like death. He said the smell would get worse whenever the wind blew, too, which, yuck. The men didn't explain why they never came forward with the information sooner, and it wasn't made public why they suddenly were coming forward now. But police felt this was sufficient evidence to get at least a search warrant for the property. This time, they arrived with cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and a hefty forensics team. On March 29, 2012, at around 10 a.m., they rolled up to Larry's residence and searched both the home and the surrounding property. Larry was present, and he just stood off to the side looking like an ass on the phone. The findings of the search have never been made public, but the media was on scene and they captured police exiting the residence with 4 brown paper bags marked as evidence. Now, sadly, as if the investigators hadn't fully fucked this case up as it was, they went a step further when the investigator carrying out the evidence failed to hand it off to the forensic team unit, who had parked a block away due to the massive media frenzy, and instead tossed the evidence bags into his trunk. That's a big no-no, guys. We don't do that. Crime Scene 101 is chain of custody. Evidence must be handled, stored, and processed in specific ways so as to eliminate the threat of contamination. Chilling in the back of a detective's trunk ain't it. To rub a further salt into the wound here, the investigator failed to take the evidence to the police station to book it into evidence, further breaking the chain of custody. But instead, he drove home for the evening, leaving the evidence in the trunk overnight. These actions alone pretty much made whatever evidence was in those bags useless. Many a case have been thrown out due to chain of custody issues with evidence and tampering far less severe than this. Evidence is the sole reason we can convict people, and when you cast even the tiniest of shadows on evidence, your whole case is doomed to crumble. It's really upsetting to hear this. It's upsetting that this case wasn't taken seriously from the jump. It's upsetting that there was never anything solid to go off of for nearly 20 years, and then for there to be a glimmer of hope only to be crushed by further shit police work, and it's just tragic. I'm usually very understanding to police and the obstacles they face and whatnot, and, scrutiny, and for the good ones. This, though, is not that. Nothing about what I've read regarding the handling of this case makes me think they handled it to the best of their abilities or to the level that was deserved. Her family has fought harder for answers than any investigator that has owned up to working on this case. With that, though, let's discuss the possible theories. I really only have two that I've been able to confidently feed with the limited amount of information actually pertaining to the case and, obviously pertaining to logic. So here are the two most logical theories I have. Either she left with someone she knew and didn't want to let her family know, which I don't think you can throw a rock without hitting a teenage girl who snuck away from her parents to meet up with either friends or a boyfriend or girlfriend. Or the doctor's lying through his motherfucking teeth and he did this, or at least knows who did this. Let's start with the first one. She left with an unknown friend. Well, what would support this is the one version of events that Larry gave about seeing Clea leave with an unknown person in an unknown car that he apparently didn't even get a glimpse of. The employee's account of Clea stating she was walking home, I guess, would support that theory as well, although I take issue with Clea picking a far more far-fetched lie to tell than just saying, hey, my mom's picking me up, she'll be here soon, I'll see you later. It feels like going the extra mile to tell a more far-fetched lie wouldn't be something Clea would do. I don't know her, though. Unless it wasn't a lie, and she did leave on foot and met this stranger at the corner or something. That would, however, discount Larry's account, though, once again. See, that's the problem. When you try to look at anyone else as a suspect besides Larry, you still end up clashing with Larry's account of what happened. That's usually never a good sign. But regardless, let's keep at it. Clea's calling home at 8 p.m. asking for messages for her would hint that she was expecting to hear from someone. However, it does clash with the whole keeping it a secret from family. But her expecting a message tells me that she was under the impression of hearing from someone at some point that evening. Whoever that someone is has never stepped forward. Friend, family member, secret lover. Which it does leave room for further suspicion that someone unseen to us has a vital role in all of this. Being that Clea did not take anything of value that she would need to be gone for any extended period of time after work, such as her purse, her wallet, ID, money, I think it's safe to say that if she had plans to meet up with someone after work, they weren't plans that were going to be very long or anything that would require cash or identity. Aside from all of this, though, there isn't much else we can deduce from that this is what happened. Now, the other theory that would be the more popular theory, I think, and more obvious theory is the employer, Larry Amos. For starters, he is the last one to see her before she disappears. She was working for him in his place of residence/work. His accounts for her last movements seem to differ throughout the investigation, and they do not match with the employee's account. He claims to police he saw Clea depart at 8:30 in an unknown vehicle with an unknown person. With that vague of a description, it makes one wonder if he even saw that. He tells Laurel the night her daughter disappears at 1 a.m. after she calls, picking up first ring, I might add, that he didn't see her leave and that he had to check her handwritten time card to confirm she had left at 8:30. He recalls hearing her leave through the door and garage like normal, though, although she didn't say bye to him, which was very unlike her. It just feels a little muddled for me. Next, he leaves the next day for a pre-planned trip. Douchey, considering his high school employee has just gone missing from his home. He returns and refuses a lie detector test, which always reeks of guilty. Let's be real here. Years later, construction workers who had done work on his home back in the late 90s recall foul odors and suspicious-looking blood spatter on insulation in the home. By the time police execute the search, what little evidence they may have uncovered is destroyed through compromise of chain of custody. This is further compounded by the police's lack of urgency early on in the case. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but I did decide to try out option 3, the wild card theory. Unlikely, but I don't think it can be ruled out either. Maybe she actually walked home. There is no proof that this happened except the word of an employee stating that she said she was going to, despite it being completely out of character. But for argument's sake, let's say she did leave on foot to walk home. She did only live less than a mile away. It's unfortunate that this case is older because I had this strategy I wanted to test, but I don't think it was very successful. It is an angle though, so I'll throw it out there. Here in California, we have something called Megan's Law. It was a law passed after a young girl, Megan, was kidnapped, raped, and killed by a known sex offender. Legislature passed a law that made it so that sex offenders had to register on this list that you can now head over to Megan's Law website, enter your address, and see how many of these registered sex offenders live within X miles of your home. There are categories and levels of seriousness, as fucked up as that sounds, because all offenses are serious. But they list the ones who are, violent offenders, the ones who are in violation of their probation. They have photos for most of them, the charges, and the dates. They also list how long the person's been said to be living at that residence. It's an amazing resource. Well, Arkansas has like a lesser version of it. It's much more simplified. There's a lot less info, but I figured I'd enter the address of her last known location, see how many offenders popped up there, and hoped there'd be like dates of residence listed on there to know how long they've been there, like it does here in California. Well, they didn't have dates listed, making the info I'm about to say irrelevant, but 4 offenders were found in the immediate area, all within age range, young and ample to commit a crime of kidnapping, abduction, etc. back in 94. My theory being that she walked home could be further fed by the idea of one of those offenders or others in the area, since gone now, saw an opportunity and took it. It's not too far out of the realm of possibility, and I felt I should throw it out there. This neighborhood is a much more rural neighborhood. Property lines bleed into each other. There's a single lane highway. There's minimal businesses and public areas. It's a dimly lit. There's a massive lush forest area known for hunting, literally right across from where she was working. It's not a densely populated area, which would, usually deter people from committing crimes of, snatching people off the street. So I think it would be fairly easy to do so at, 8, 9 o'clock at night. It is hard for me to think that a young woman as smart as Clea would choose to walk home alone in the dark, though. She hadn't done it before, so why now? That's my biggest issue with this theory. But I don't know, guys. I'm a bit torn on both main theories the more I ponder them. The doctor looks good for this crime. He had opportunity and means. Motive, could be anything. Nothing is outwardly known, though. But at the same time, Clea called home, expecting a message from someone. She never made the second call to mom to pick her up. Either she wasn't able to, or she was planning to leave with someone else, but not for long, with no purse or money, etc. The only thing I know for sure is that the people closest to Clea have to have the answer. They may not know it, or maybe they do, but that would be the key to solving this. It's either a friend within her social circle, or it's, the employer/employees. Someone saw, heard, or knows something, however small it may be. This case is so close to being solved, Clea deserves to come home. No one should be lost forever. No one deserves that. Whether they are here on Earth or have since passed, they deserve to know that their loved ones miss them and to bring them home. They want peace for them and their missing loved ones. As a mom, I can't imagine the hole in this mother's soul. That deep aching darkness that forever is raw and relentless. It's torture, it's hell. Moms are wired to be these human meat shields for their kids. I wouldn't so much as blink before stepping in front of a fucking bullet for any of my babies. It's in my code to live in order to keep them living. That's just being a mom. To never be able to complete that desire is deafening. Clea Hall was 18 years old when she went missing in 1994. At the time, she was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds. She has black hair, brown eyes, and a dark complexion. She had a chipped front tooth, like me, very proud of it, and a surgical scar on her left knee. When last seen, she was wearing a navy blue and white 2-piece shorts set and had polka dots on the shorts and stripes on the shirt. She had white socks and white sneakers on, and she was wearing small stud earrings, press-on nails, hair extensions, and a white bow in her hair. If you have any information about Cleashindra, please call the Pine Bluff Police Department at 870-543-5111. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe out there. Fuck creepy non-doctors with home offices that are awake at 1 a.m. answering phone calls on first ring and leave town and refuse to take lie detector tests. And fuck sloppy, lazy police work that fucks up cases from being solved. Don't walk home when your mama is willing to give you a ride. Until next time, bye-bye.